So as we are saying, we are talking about the exposure triangle, and exposure triangle basically deals with three things, three aspects: aperture, shutter speed. So we deal with aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So it is called an exposure triangle. It is called an exposure triangle because it works as a triangle, and once you manipulate one aspect, be it aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, once you manipulate one aspect, you have to adjust another one. That is why we call it aperture exposure triangle. They relate each other with each other, that once you manipulate one, you'll have to play around with the other one. So we are looking first of all at aperture, and if said it is the size of the circular hole. It is the size of the circular hole on the lens. It is the size of the circular hole in the lens that lets in light. Number one, allow me. So we do have our lens. The aperture is located on the lens. It is located on the lens, and once you adjust, as you have your zoom lens, the aperture opens and closes. So it is located here on the lens, that is the aperture, and it allows light to get in, to get to the image sensor. Yeah? So that is what aperture basically is. It is an opening that lets in light. So you can say the bigger the hole, the more light that reaches the sensor. The bigger the hole, tunaandika the bigger the hole, the more light that reaches the sensor. The bigger the hole, the more light that reaches the sensor. So once you have a bigger hole, more light gets in. Bigger hole, more light gets in. More light gets in. So wakati the hole is bigger, it means more light will get in. Sawa? Yeah? And your image is going to be very much exposed. Itakuwa with enough brightness, and you'll be able, that is why we are calling it exposure. So the moment the aperture is open wide, then more light gets in. But once the hole is small, now the light that gets in is very little, which means your image is going to be not bright. It won't be bright as when it is open. So that is what aperture basically is. Something else we need to know is that aperture is basically measured using f-stops. Aperture is measured using f-stops. Measured in f-stops. It is measured in f-stops. So once you take your camera, and you want to adjust the setting, whatever you will find once you open is something that is labeled, the numbers are labeled F number, or you can still call them F numbers. Sawa. So it is F numbers. And one thing about the F numbers is they go contrary to the opening. What do I mean? Once you have a bigger number, it means it goes opposite, because a bigger number, the smaller the opening. The smaller the opening. So the bigger the number, the smaller the opening. The smaller the number, small number, big opening. That is how it operates. That is one thing you have to master. That is one thing you have to master. And we are talking about, we are learning the essence of you learning about this exposure triangle, so that you'll be able to apply it when you're using the manual mode. We've gone through the modes, the auto mode, the aperture priority, shutter priority. The essence of us going through the exposure triangle, it is by rule. you ought to know about the exposure triangle, because every camera, be it a camcorder, be it a DSLR, be it a mirrorless camera, they all imply the same concept. They use this same formula. Every camera, to adjust light and to expose, make sure that your image or your clip is well exposed. That is the technique these cameras use, okay? So you have to be aware, you have to know them, how they operate. So that is aperture for you. It is a hole located in the lens. It is actually like blades. So it adjusts once you adjust the numbers, you open and you close. So the bigger the opening, the more light gets in. But again, the bigger the opening, it means as a very small f number, okay? For example, we have f numbers from maybe you have to master this exposure triangle. If you fail to master exposure triangle, then it becomes hard for you to understand everything concerning the exposure triangle or how to operate a camera. Because people say if you don't know how to use a camera when it's in manual mode, then you don't know how to use a camera. Somehow could be right, and personally, in my opinion, I would say it is true. So we are saying, we have a very good example of a f number, f1.8. Once you go to your camera screen, you'll never find the word aperture. You'll come across the f, and that is what we've said, it is the measurement of the aperture. So you have f1.8, and you also have f22. You also have f22. So we've said, the bigger the number, the smaller the opening. So the moment you have a very big number like f22, you have a very small opening. They go contrary, small opening. These is something you ought to master. A bigger f number, a smaller opening. A smaller f number, a big opening. So in this scenario, when you have f1.8, there is more light getting in. And here, we have less light getting in. That is as simple as aperture is concerned. As simple as aperture is concerned, you have to master. It is measured in f numbers. It is measured in f numbers, and they go contrarily. The bigger the opening, the smaller the number. And the bigger the opening, of course, this works like a tap. Tap tulisema, tap ikifunguka sana, ukifungua tap sana, maji mingi inatoka, si ndio? But once you have a very small, you open kidogo, very little water comes out. So the same applies. The moment you have a very big opening, more light gets in, and your image is going to be very much exposed. But once you have a very small opening, less light is getting in. Unless it is circumstances that gives you that you have to have a small opening, maybe in daylight. In broad daylight, you don't need a very big opening because already you have sunlight that is providing enough light. So you don't need, maybe in dull conditions or inside rooms, that is when probably we would have a very big opening. But outside, smaller opening. So that is aperture for you, as much as the exposure triangle is concerned, and as much as the three aspects of the exposure triangle: aperture, shutter priority, shutter speed, and ISO are concerned. Okay? Good. Kata hiyo.